I'll just do an intro and then we can go from there. All right,
Cool.
everybody, welcome
Sure.
back to the okay. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Autopilot on podcast. We have another guest today. We have Tom. Welcome, Tom. And of course,
Good to
John's
be here.
here. Prison sentence John in the bathroom.
Yep. We'll get out of there someday. One of these days.
With a flashy new haircut. Makes him look younger.
Hey, gotta look good.
All right. Well, so Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you started flying, how you moved up and to where you're at now.
Flying for me, I guess, has been a my second career. Um, I first started out doing fisheries and like biology work. Went to college, and from there decided to go into that path of learning all about fish. And in that process of doing field work, we spent a lot of time around airplanes and helicopters here in Alaska, which was something I had never thought I'd get to do, flying in like Cessna 185s on floats and little R-44s popping around to these little lakes. So that kind of, to a degree, lit the fire, pursuing aviation as something more of a career than as a hobby. And at some point, I decided to go down that path. Tried to figure out how to get myself from point A to point B. Started taking flying lessons. I think it was like back in 2015, 2016 is when I first started. And as I was going through that process, I was looking at the cost of everything. And at the time, relatively speaking, it was expensive, as if it's not expensive right now.
Yeah.
Um, Decided that the most economical way to do it was to actually buy an airplane. So it was a couple week process of looking for airplanes, and I stumbled across a little Cessna 150, 4 hours on the motor, and kind of a
Wow.
perfect little trainer. Yeah, for sure. Bought it and then hired a couple CFIs, and then it was just kind of off to the races. So that summer when I had purchased that aircraft, got my private in it, and then flew for a little bit. Had an injury in there, so it took me out of flying for a while, but then jumped right back in as soon as I recovered from that. And it was a bit of an inflection point when I was working for the state, because at the time I was a fish culturist, was working in the hatchery system, growing fish, and was doing my instrument training at the same time. And as we all know, instrument flying and just being in the IFR world is such a perishable skill. Um, and I was doing it kind of piecemeal to the point where I'd have a lot of progress and then take some time off because I couldn't get the time off work. And so, two steps forward, one step back, and I was just kind of fighting that process. So quit my job, went full send into it, sold
Nice.
everything I owned, rented my house out, did everything I could to squeeze every single penny that I had.
Wow.
Yeah, and just went pursued it full time that summer that I decided to do that. Got my instrument rating, and then that was down in Anchorage. Came back up to Fairbanks and was like, okay, now what? I still need my commercial and my multi, but I kind of need a job because
Mm-hmm.
the other goal was not trying to go into debt. So walked around the airfield, was trying to find jobs, and I eventually got my job, a job just loading cargo, and used that avenue to kind of get myself into the position that I was in and I am in now, talking with the pilots that I was working with, loading and unloading their aircraft. And once I had got my commercial single, this was down in Idaho, and right around the COVID time too. So this was a bit of I guess, a bit of a transition period for all of us. Um, with the job prospects happening um, right before COVID, and COVID hits, and it all kind of falls apart. And so you're kind of scrambling as like, okay, what do we do now? You could take your foot off the gas or push forward. And so decided to push forward. I came back up to Alaska and went back to work as a cargo guy. And this is also where I met Scott, right around that same time. The caravan pilots and the Pilatus pilots saw what I was doing, and any flight that they could, they'd be like, "Hey Tom, come with us." And so I'd hop on, help them unload, and then the Part 91 legs, they were like, "Here you go, log the time." And so I was getting to get
That's
some
cool.
caravan time, a little Pilatus time, which then ultimately led into the chief pilot at one point in time saying, "Hey Tom, do you have your commercial multi yet?" And at the time I was like, "No, but give me a week." Uh, Took a week off, came back a week later and had my fancy little paper certificate with the ink still wet, and I slapped it on his desk and I said, "Let's go." And he's like, "Cool. Well, ground school for the Embraer 120 is this fall." And so I used that to work my way into a first officer position, a sitting right seat in an Embraer, which was pretty freaking dope for, going from essentially a Cessna 150 to a transport category aircraft.
Yeah.
Totally,
Um,
man.
wild experience. And that position had us based, it was a 2 on 2 off down in Laredo, Texas. So my first taste of like real hard IFR system flying in and out of Mexico, which is an experience in and of itself when you're a brand new SIC in an airplane that you hardly have ever flown, dealing with the challenges there. The late nights, we were an on-demand operation, Part 135. Yeah, it was a huge learning experience. I mean, I wouldn't trade that for the world because it made me the pilot I am today. But you definitely got to. It was a trial by fire almost. You kind of thrown to the wolves, and you either sink or you swim. Getting to see the lower 48 and that type of flying, and the thunderstorms that happen down there, whereas not so much you would get up here in Alaska. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So from that point, things slowed down a little bit because it was just strictly on-demand cargo as a hungry young man, always looking for the next job, the next opportunity. I had come across another cargo operator here up here in Anchorage, and this was flying 1900s. It was one of those situations where you're just walking around the field with a stack of resumes, knocking on doors. And this was one of those situations. I walked into the office, asked to talk to the chief pilot. He comes out, "Here's my resume. Cool. Shoot me an email in 2 weeks." So I have an email. 2 weeks later, he sends me one back. He's like, "All right, interviews are on this day. Show up." I had an interview, got hired on, and spent, gosh, maybe about 2 years flying the 1900 all over Alaska, sitting in the right seat, and then moving over to the left seat as a captain for a bit, which was just an unbelievable experience just to do a lot of that flying, especially since it was like Southeast Alaska, all in the Aleutian chain, um, out to Dutch Harbor, some of the more technical, more remote, very desolate places. A lot of these birds, they were workhorses, and most of them didn't have autopilot. So you're up in the flight levels, hand
Jeez.
flying. Oftentimes, our start time. I'm an AM guy, so we were starting at 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning,
Whoa.
heading off to Kodiak or heading off to Southeast Alaska. And how bad could the weather be? And then you pull up the weather and it's at mins more often than not. And you and the first officer, you and the captain kind of look at each other and you're like, "You good? Yeah, let's do it." And you just drive on in.
Mind you, no autopilot either in the
No.
Pro.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I mean, you got really, really good at hand flying, and just being really in tune with the controls and the aircraft and the inputs that you would put in and what they would do. And um, I remember a very specific situation. It was either actually coming back into Anchorage or going to Kodiak, and we were talking about shooting the ILS because it's a DME arc off a VOR or an NDB, and then remembering your lead radial to turn in, but then also remember to switch to your ILS frequency. If you don't do that, you're going to be totally off.
Mm.
And then as soon as you get past the final approach fix, using less, even if it was gusty, using less aileron but more rudder, just to slowly get yourself dialed in onto that
Yep.
ILS and your glide slope. And at that moment, it was just like, oh, ding, light went off. And after that, you could kind of put yourself in any situation and you would just be kind of dialed in all the way.
These are all six-pack
Um,
airplanes.
yes, for the most part, they were in this transition period of going to a Garmin suite. But yeah, very much six pack Garmin 400 series, 430s, getting in there, mashing the
Mm.
buttons, turning the dial. Is this what you want? Yep. All right, good. Direct enter,
Yep.
enter.
Turn time,
That's
twist,
what I was
throttle,
gonna
talk.
say. I was gonna say you don't just go direct radio in off a fix and hit two buttons and let it do the
Right.
rest.
I wish it was that easy.
I actually have a lot of. I was at SkyWest for a couple years, and all those senior guys were on the Brasilia. I don't know if it's the same model. I think it was the Embraer 120 or the
Yeah.
Brasilia that you were on. The stories they would tell me off going off NDB approaches up in Idaho, or
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Yeah.
what you were saying. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, I bet the radar coverage up in Alaska is worse, though. They didn't have a lot of those things, so I genuinely think like being able to fly that, you're probably one of the, and I'm not just blowing smoke, I think you're probably one of the most proficient IFR pilots in the country if you know how to do those things and
Yeah.
some of the most challenging environments in the world. So I think going into any job interview you wanted to, I think people have a lot of respect for you nowadays in that sense. That's awesome, man. I got a lot of
Yeah.
questions for you, though, too, about your
For
story so
sure.
far.
For sure.
What was it like buying an airplane back then?
Dude,
Like,
it was. Sorry, go ahead.
how do you go about that?
It's
You know?
thankfully there were some people in my life that were pilots, and
Okay.
they were constant. They knew where I was trying to go, and so they were kind of constantly on the lookout. And we all, when this particular 150 came along, we all kind of came together and we were like, this is a really good deal. Like if you're gonna do this, you need to do this with this airplane. And there's actually kind of a cool story behind that particular aircraft. There's one of the local legends in the state of Alaska. His name's Jorgi Jorgensen. He is one of the Alaska Native pioneers for aviation, and he has a whole amazing story. There's actually a book written about him. But that was he had owned that airplane. So I actually got to work with him and hear his story and talk to him about flying. But it was just, yeah, there's an airplane here. We know this much about it. Here's the logs. You can kind of review them. And do you want it? Yep, here's some money. And that's kind of it. Um,
Did you have a gut feeling on like, this is it and I feel good about it? Or was it more of like a leap of faith in a way, or kind of both?
I think it was a bit of, well, I think it was more of like a leap of faith. Like you trusted the people around you, but
Sure.
with any airplane, there's so many question marks. It was 1967 Cessna 150H model, but we got I don't want to say lucky, but we were very fortunate in finding this aircraft. It was a great condition. The motor was a huge selling point. Granted, you're still in that like ticking time bomb space of the first 100 to 300 hours on that motor. Anything could really happen.
Sure.
But I think that was just something we dealt with as time went on, and it ended up working out. Use
Nice.
that to build a lot of time and build a lot of experience, and actually kind of a perfect little aircraft to really hone your skills, and so much more is like your decision making, just because you don't have the power. You do have some time, but power
Not
being
much.
no, not at all.
Did you envision yourself? I'm just thinking about this now. My path is very different than Scott's, and then your path is probably more in line with Scott, but also pretty unique in that own set too. Did you think in the position you are today, if you look back when you first started, is that how you kind of saw your career going in terms of I'm going to go fly these airplanes down to Laredo, go to Mexico, hop back up and do that, Brasilia flying? Because
Yeah,
that's so different than someone like me or so many other people and down in the lower 48.
right.
Was that kind of what you envisioned, what you wanted to do was go do that backcountry kind of stuff, or be more structured and that's just kind of where things left you?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you bring that up because my initial path and my initial thought, never in a million years did I think I would be sitting here as an airline captain flying jets. My original idea was way back at the beginning where I was, a fisheries technician sitting here flying in Cessna 185s. Like that's what I wanted. I wanted to be a bush pilot. I wanted to own a Cessna 185 on floats and work for myself and, fly out to the bush and take, hunters and fishermen and guide people and show them the state of Alaska that I know. And so it's interesting to see my path of getting to experience Alaska in very different and unique ways in the sense of different types of aircraft and different types of operations. And now sitting as flying jets uh, didn't think I'd find myself in this position, but I'm really happy and grateful as to how it ended up and how the path that I took to get here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always have a lot of respect for guys like you and Scott, and I know there are so many more out there that doing this podcast has been a lot of fun. Just hearing everyone's different paths. Even Connor's was pretty unique.
Yeah.
So being able to go and see every different area of aviation has been eye opening for me. And I know just getting to know Scott as well, it's just been like, wow, there's so much more out there than flying an Airbus or instructing or whatever.
Right.
And a part of me wishes maybe I could have done that, but also I really like the position I'm in right now. So I think everyone's kind of meant to be on the path they are, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Not trying to go too spiritual, but it usually works out for people who just continue through the path. Scott, did you do much flying up there in Alaska?
Yeah, I flew. That's how Tom and I met. I flew for a pretty big carrier out of Fairbanks. I flew PC-12s and caravans pretty much from the Canadian border all the way to the west coast of Alaska and most parts north up to the Arctic coast. A lot of pretty cool
Wow.
places up there. Yeah, pretty remote areas. NDBs and to minimums, all those good things back in the day. But yeah, like you said, John, there's different paths. There's people that Tom and I knew up there that are still up there. Their
Oh yeah.
entire career has been flying in Navajo from Fairbanks to Fort Yukon and Arctic Circle, like every day.
That's
Like,
so
like
crazy
that's their whole
to think
career. It's
about.
crazy. I mean, it's cool. It's totally different flying. I would love to do it again, but those companies just don't have the airline benefits. That's why we all end up at the airlines eventually. If they did,
Right.
man, people would never leave.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
kidding.
John made a comment, you can about your experience, Tom, and how you could, with that, you can go anywhere and do anything, right? So you came to the airlines finally.
Finally.
Yep.
After some encouragement.
And yeah, a little bit. But you had the choice to go mainline or regional, and you chose to become a direct entry captain in a regional, which
Yes.
is really unique. Could you tell us a little bit about that and why you made those decisions?
One of the big overarching decisions was quality of life. I knew with mainline, really any mainline that's based West Coast, is a lot of red eye flying, a lot of late flying, and knowing myself, even though like, hey, I'm a morning person, I have no problem starting at 1 a.m. Uh, maybe
That's red eye
maybe,
flying.
maybe,
That's what
I
time I
know,
normally go to work.
maybe poking little holes in my logic there.
It's all how you perceive it, I guess, right?
That's right.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Glass half full kind of thing.
Exactly. But a lot of it was just quality of life. One of the things I had found through my travels through just my aviation career so far was I really like sleeping in my own bed most nights and being able
Same.
to assign some structure to my life because I like all of us, we're creatures of habit, but have some sort of like way to kind of center myself and center my life, and I found that being able to come home most nights, be able to have more of a normal life. It also helps that like my family's here, a bit more of a grounding, if you will. But just having that quality of life, being able to having a more normal schedule, normal, if you will,
Mhm.
as far as the
Having
airline
control of
industry.
your life, maybe.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
And then the other side is being able to fly up here. It's really hard to describe what it's like to fly jets, or even turboprops up in Alaska. There's something about these villages, about the people, about the destinations that we go to that it's much more of a, not so much a bigger picture, but something that's more in line with the core of who I am and being able to be more connected to the people in the state just because it's not so much a means of like, oh, I need to go here. It's like I have to go here. It's a way of life. It's part of who we are as Alaskans. Me being able to kind of contribute to that and be part of that whole process is another driver of like why I decided to stay more regional when I am operating these flights and seeing these passengers. Like you start to develop, a rapport with them, and oh well, these people get on and they look in the flight deck or they see us and they're like, oh well, Captain Tom, he's operating this flight. We're, not that we're not always in good hands, but you start to develop relationships with these people, and they understand who you are and why you're here. Um,
That is so cool.
yeah, yeah, it's a really unique experience. And I don't know, just because I have done some lower 48 flying, but I don't know if that happens as much or if that's such an integral part.
No, no. I had a lady last night, and I looked at the G limit on the airplane because I learned how you can do that now, and it was one of the best landings I've had. And she goes up to us, and I'm happy getting out of the flight deck, feeling like that was my landing, whatever. I didn't tell anyone. She said, "I can't believe we made it. That was really close, huh? Feel like you
What?
guys need to do better next time." I'm like, so yeah, the
Look
people
at
down
this.
here are a little bit different than your wholesome story of connecting with the people in different tribes in Alaska. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I thought it was so cool. Is like, man, I think that gives you a lot of purpose doing those different routes that you do, is connecting with those
Yeah.
people, and that is something that definitely changed the job. Really quick, what kind of routes do you do up there? I'm not familiar with Alaska much. I just know Fairbanks and Anchorage,
Sure.
but I'm curious. I'm sure other listeners would like to know, like, what does a typical schedule look like, or the destinations, and how much variation in the map do you have?
Sure. So we have most of our flights, and mainly because I'm a reserve captain, I wish I could kind of give you a better picture of like what my schedule looks like, but
Sure.
it's outside of a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning and saying, "Hey, we need you to go here." But oftentimes it's trips out to Western Alaska, the Bristol Bay area, up to Kotzebue and Nome, all the way up to the North Slope, and then Fairbanks. We'll also head down to the lower 48.
Wow.
But it's a pretty broad area that we get to go play around in. It's kind of nice. And then so kind of doubling or coming back towards Scott's original question as to going into the regional airlines and then as a captain. And one of the other kind of driving reasons is that after flying some of the stuff I've done in turboprops and understanding what it's like to sit in that seat for 3.5, 4 hours and listening to that drone. Um,
Hmm.
my patience for sitting in a very confined space is shrunk a bit,
Yup.
and
Sure.
with the regional flying, like I think our longest flight within the state is maybe less than an hour and a half, and so that keeps me active, that keeps me engaged, and getting to work with my first officers, and it's a much more collaborative experience from break release to setting the break, which I really enjoy just because it's we're here as a team and we're here to work together and learn from each other. And so it's this constant back and forth talking about threats and things we can expect, and just a really solid amount of CRM that goes on.
Nice. Are the
Yeah.
pilots mostly from that area
A
that you
lot of
fly
them.
with, or go
Yeah,
ahead?
a lot of them are, yeah, but a lot of them have, from my understanding, it's like a lot of them have gone from like the CFI world into the right seat, whereas there's a cohort of us that have very similar stories to mine, where we've flown turboprops in the 135 world, in the 121 world, and we were like, that jet's pretty nice. Let's see what this is all about. Everybody that's flown it so far has really loved it.
That's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you guys go into Bethel?
We do.
Oh,
Actually,
you
one of
do.
my last trips was there in the Bethel.
You wanted to talk about fitness and health, so let's dig into that a little bit. What are your big things on those topics?
For fitness, one of my big things outside of just making sure that we're physically active outside of the flight deck is actually just fueling ourselves properly. One of the things that I noticed after flying multiple legs is the amount of fatigue that you get, and I don't know if it happens to you guys, but it does certainly happen to me. Is you get so focused and so involved in the things that you're doing that you kind of forget to eat,
Yep.
and
Yep.
like understanding like how important it is to not only feed yourself, but then the other side is making sure you have stuff like prepped. So quality food as far as the meals that you're making for yourself, but then portion control so you're not totally overeating just because it's we sit there for hours on end while it's not so physically demanding, but the mental demand and fortitude is there, and that requires a tremendous amount of energy. Just to stay focused for that long is no easy task. And so just the importance of making sure that that's all sorted for us is something that I've come across, and I've shifted how I operate because of it. And
What's
so
that
maybe,
shift been like? How did you do that shift, and what were you doing before, and what did you go to?
oh man, so before it was just like snacks in the bag, like
Yep.
whatever I could grab, whatever
Mm-hmm.
was easy, snacks in the
Mm-hmm.
bag, and which was very easy and convenient because you're just like, okay, well, let me grab like a meat stick or let me grab like a granola bar, and not really thinking about like what's in them. And still at the end of that day, whether it's, a 14-hour duty day or you're flying max time and you're still tired. After doing that a number of times, especially during my 135 days where it was just like 5 or 6 days on where you're just max, max, max every single day, and it's like, okay, I'm dead by the end of it.
Right.
Yep.
Changing the way that you think and understand like nutrition, that has helped like an incredible amount, to the point where it's like I'm meal prepping now and really taking a close look at how much protein and how much carbs and how much fats I'm actually taking with me, and remembering to eat during the day. And I find that if you do those things by the end of the day, even if it's a really long day, let's say it's a 4 leg day or a 5 leg day, I'm just not completely wasted, tired at the end of it, just by changing your nutrition and by planning a little bit better, because otherwise it's either snacks or you're going to the airport and you're buying whatever around
Oh man.
McDonald's, Starbucks, not to put them on blast, but
Yeah, but it's all
not necessarily the best for
yeah,
you.
it's all processed preservative.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up because so when I started at my current airlines, when I really started packing and meal prepping, and a lot of people give me crap because I carry, you have to carry a big cooler bag, so now you're carrying a house with you. But it's so nice to have good food. And
It is.
recently, I was like, oh, I'll try a trip of just buying food out and just bringing some snacks only, and it's terrible because it's like half the time you get, there's a line at the restaurant in the airport, or the restaurants are closed because I fly mostly nighttime, and so you're just
Hmm.
stuck eating whatever you can get, which is just crap. And I had to stop and take a look, and I realized, oh my gosh, how much sugar I'm taking in now. So this morning I spent like an hour meal prepping and cooking and stuff because I start a 4 day tonight,
Nice.
and I was like, I'm not doing it again, man. I'm not gonna, eat freaking burgers and French fries because that's the best thing you can get from the bar in the
Right.
restaurant. It's not good for you. So,
No.
Can I say one thing too?
hmm,
I think with just like a challenging or technical flight or a check ride or anything we do in this industry, it's all about how you prepare. Because if you go into it and don't have any idea and just kind of freeball it, that's when mistakes are made and that's when
Right.
issues start to arise. I think the same is true for fitness along with your diet. I just bought I can't remember what they're called, but they're like a lunchbox, but they're heatable.
yeah,
Scott, do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah, like a bento box thing that plugs in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I only fly for the most part 2 legs. I just go somewhere and I come back. So that's kind of my schedule, and I can usually either do a lunch or a dinner. So there really is no reason not to be able to have a meal and then maybe something else for additional protein. And so that's something over the last probably 4 days I've reevaluated. I've used a couple of different AI sources and reimagined kind of what I'm going to be doing going forward. Because just like how you said, Tom, I'm kind of reimagining. Okay, what do I actually want to do to be healthy long term?
Right.
And that's something, I'm younger, but it's this industry, it's all about your health. If you don't have that, you're done. So
Right.
um, and then also, this might sound bad, but it's just the truth. I have a 1-year-old kid, and I've been commuting back and forth, all of that, and I just got back into running or being active more, where
Good.
I'm actually getting the heart rate up, trying
Mm-hmm.
to burn 700 or 800 calories of active energy on my Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was delayed 7 hours in Newark yesterday,
Yeah.
I was so much more zen of a person, and I was like, you know what? It's whatever, man. If the captain was having a bad day and really frustrated with the situation, I was just like, it's not that big of a deal, and I just felt so much more like non-sluggish, like some of the
Sure.
best I felt in a long time. I don't know if that was endorphins or anything like that, but I remember what it's like to work out continuously, and I think for our job, it's so important because we're stuck in a box for half the day And so if we're not challenging ourselves or, exerting ourselves, your body kind of just goes back to reverts to, I'm just going to be lazy the entire day because I'm lazy half the day already. So I think you need to mentally shift your attitude and then go out and try to make it happen. So I will let you know how it goes, but I'm actively trying to do exactly what you're saying.
No, I think that John, you point out you make a really good point there when you talk about how it's that shift of being more active is helping you in the flight deck. And I
Right.
it brings to mind a couple situations that I've come across in my career. And as a captain, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that Zen moment that you had of like, you know what, it's a really long day, but I'm here, like I'm ready to go. Like
Yeah.
I know it's to some degree like the captain is in charge of many things, but one of the things in my mind is setting the tone for that flight deck and for that flight. But it's also something the first officer can do. And when it's been a long day and the person sitting next to you is chipper and ready to go, like that is an absolute game changer. And that could, change the entire outcome of that flight. When we help ourselves, we help everybody around us.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so
Yeah.
it's really, really nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of those people where I used to be morbidly obese, super overweight, and then, in my 20s I lost 70 pounds and started exercising and everything. And now if I don't work out for 2 days, I get really like irritable and easily upset, You got to keep a routine.
You
Sitting
do.
all day is brutal.
To kind of go back even further, I know the reason of the whole regional thing is it allows me to do that a bit better. I know you guys have your 3 4 day trips, and that I'll eventually once I get aligned that will also happen. But right now it's pretty sweet to the point where I'm able to keep that routine and show up to work, even though it's been a little while since I've flown. It's at the very least you're showing up physically ready, mentally ready. Then who knows? I mean, they could be at the end of their 4 day and they're just totally exhausted. It's like, you know what? I'm here. I got the energy. Let's do this.
I was telling this to my wife a couple of days ago where I don't mind working more days if I'm sleeping in my own bed every night
Mhm.
and doing those type of things because I can maintain a routine every single day. Like even today, I only got a couple hours of sleep. Had to go get my medical, but I still had enough energy to go get the 10,000 steps and then do about 30 minutes
Solid.
after that of exercise.
Nice.
And so I'm trying to make those steps to continually do that. But I will tell you this when I was at a regional and I was commuting to 4 day trips, it was like my least favorite thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
So, because I never had the motivation after a 12-hour day to go to the gym or do something like that. But when I'm at home with my wife and I have my neighborhood and everything else that I'm going to, it makes it so much more easy to commit to being healthy. And so that's something I know I've talked to Scott about this, but the airline we work for, there's not a lot of great things about it, but man, being able to be home every night and have that schedule the way I am, and that might not always stay the same, but I'm going to take advantage of it right now because it's a game changer for me, just having a young kiddo at home too. So yeah, I'm going to have to talk to you offline maybe, and I can show you kind of what I'm thinking about. And
Yeah, for sure.
you guys have done all this stuff for a long time. So
Sure.
just trying to get healthier, I guess.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep. Consistency is key.
Yeah.
Yeah. John, I know you wanted to talk about red eyes a little bit. Do you want to expand on
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to my world, dude.
So let's
I'm
talk
just a
about it then, Scott,
vampire.
because how do you do it with, we just got done talking about routine and kind of my perspective on it. How do you go to red eyes and then exercise? Can you tell the listeners like what's the cadence? So like if you have this trip that you're going on tonight,
Mhm.
how are you planning on um, getting whatever exercise you're wanting to and maintaining a decent sense of REM sleep? How do you go about that?
Well, so I've always been a night person ever since I think since I was a teenager. I've struggled to get up early in the morning. So like for me, I guess it's just the way my internal clock was formed. I don't have a problem staying up late. I struggle to get up early so much that I'd rather just drink an extra cup of coffee to stay up all night than to try to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning because then I just feel like crap all day long. But to answer your question, my normal day is just like any of yours, except it's just in a different timeline, right? So On my days off, I'll get up 10, 11 a.m. local time, and I'll go to the gym around 2 in the evening, spend time with friends, and then I stay up till 2 in the morning. So like that's all my alone time, right? Like after 10 o'clock at night or whatever, I go home and I take care of whatever I need to do, clean, laundry, all that stuff. Where I live, I don't have to worry about, upsetting the neighbors or anything, so I can do all that stuff at night. So it's just different timeline for me. But like when I'm on the road, for example, like tonight, I think we get, I'm going one leg to Miami. It's a red eye from Denver to Miami. Getting to Miami at, I don't know, 5, 6 in the morning, something. So I'll just go to sleep. When I get to the hotel, I'll wind down for 30, 45 minutes and then go to bed. And then I'll get up 2, 3 in the afternoon, whatever, get something to eat, have some coffee, and then I'll go to the hotel gym, work out for 30, 45 minutes, prep my uniform, pack, shower, all that stuff, and then just go to work. So it's not any different than most people. It's just a different time frame or timeline, but it's the same kind of day-to-day thing for me. I'm sure it would be a different story for somebody like you guys who are morning people that got stuck on red eyes.
Yeah.
It'd be a real struggle. Yeah.
I'm a morning person, but not a 5 a.m. departure, 4 a.m. report, 2 a.m. wake up.
Well,
That's
in
middle of the
Tom's
night
defense,
person.
1 a.m.
you
his
know?
time is like 6 a.m. your time. So
Yeah. Going off of what you said, I've been doing mostly nights where I've been getting back around midnight or 1 or 2 a.m.
Okay.
For me, that's fine. Like if I can get back into bed by, say, 2 a.m.,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay with me because I'd much rather do that schedule than a 5 a.m. or even a 6 a.m. departure. Taking my body out of the REM sleep like that is really, really difficult. And I don't think it's really natural either
Mm-hmm.
for me because I think a lot of people could probably agree with me that I cannot, how do I say this? When it comes to going to bed, I can't go to bed at 5 or 6 p.m.
It's
So
hard.
No, nobody can. I mean, maybe
yeah,
I don't know if you're 90, but like most people can't do
my wife
that.
can.
Can
She
she
can
really?
take a nap in the middle. She can take a nap and be
Wife's old
lights out.
sold.
Ooh.
Yeah, and she'll sit down in bed and she's asleep in 5 minutes. And my ass is up there for 45 minutes trying to listen to a podcast and fall asleep, and it just doesn't happen. So that's what makes it really difficult.
We need to start recording at those times, dude.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll bore you to sleep.
But yeah, honestly though, it's just if I had that, that's like the number one superpower I would do because with our airline, there's delays quite a bit of times. If I could magically have my schedule be all 4 a.m. reports for 7 or 8 hours of credit a day and be done by noon, and do that every day, and I could go to bed immediately and have that perfect schedule, I would do it in a heartbeat because you have no traffic on either end. Everything is on time for the most part. It's very smooth, but I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. And then secondly, when it comes to what was I going to say? See, I'm off 2.5 hours of sleep right now, so I'm losing my train of thought. But
it's a good example of fatigue.
That's it right there.
Yeah. I'm not even kidding you. Yeah, so that's what I would have to say is just I'll take the later nights, but man, those early mornings, that's basically a damn red eye to me. I'd rather do a red eye sometimes than the 4 a.m. reports because I have 2 hours of being able to fly an airplane, and then I'm tapped. Basically,
Yeah.
It feels like.
Yeah, it's. I think that's more dangerous for most people than working later. Caffeine, nicotine, whatever you need to do to stay awake. People can do that, but interrupting your sleep cycle is worse than anything.
Yeah, I mean, what is there? There is regs about that, but sometimes I don't feel like those are enough. For how much time change, especially flying on the lower 48 when it's multiple time zones,
Right.
and so compounding on the fatigue that's already there. There's real threats involved.
I think it'd be really cool to be able to know. Let's say you have that 4 a.m. report. If you could go do one full flight and it's like 8 a.m., right? or 10 a.m., if you could feel how you're feeling now, you're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty tired right now. And then feel the difference between yourself at 100% at like, say, 2 p.m., 8 hours of sleep, and then
Right.
feel yourself now and see how much of a degradation you actually have in mental
Mm-hmm.
capacity along with
Totally.
physical. And I think it'd be really interesting because the FAA allows you to go, I don't know, 12 hours. There's rest limits, but it's really hard as a crew member to know, okay, am I actually fatigued or am I just tired?
Right.
Like, it's so hard drawing that line because we're all so mission oriented of trying to get the flight completed. So that's probably the hardest thing I think about with those report times.
Yeah,
That does come
definitely.
with
That
experience. Go
it
ahead, Tom.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting you bring that up because I feel like that's a conversation that like we know fatigue exists, but where at what point do you draw the line? How do you learn where that line is? Is it one of those things where it's you learn it after you've crossed it, or
For
now
most
that kind of
people.
sparks, yeah, that sparks more conversation of people that I'd like to have that conversation with, people who are more senior to me. It's like, when do you call fatigue? How do you make that determination? Because I'm
Yeah.
still trying to figure that out.
And they don't teach you that. None of
No,
the
no at
airlines, they
all.
don't really,
Well, they don't want
it's
to
just like,
because, yeah,
hey,
that it's not in their
Yeah,
yeah,
benefit. Because then you're, oh, okay, here's how I call fatigue. They don't want
yeah,
that. They have to do it.
right.
It's required, but it's just like any company. Why would they tell you how to get yourself out of work, right? It does come with experience. Learning to say no is a big part of it. Just had a captain call fatigue a couple days ago at the end of we had a long freaking day. We took off out of Detroit and held for an hour waiting to go into Baltimore. Thunderstorms all over the place. We were zigging and zagging, going through turbulence, and he was a super early morning guy, and he got called in off reserve because the captain I was paired with called in sick, and so we were flying all nights. So he was in the same boat where he's a morning guy and he's stuck on nights, and he's like, "Dude, this is a struggle bus for me." And it was a real heavy duty load because we were going to divert had they not opened up. We had like 2 minutes remaining before we hit bingo. They let us in. We got there, and so he ended up. They wanted us. Our flight was going to be delayed. They were going to want us to be like 2 hours behind, essentially now flying a red eye down the East Coast. And he called them and he's like, I'm not doing that. He's like, no way. And so he called fatigue. And the good news, at least with our company, is when you call fatigue, there's no question. There's never like, oh, why? It's like, okay, got it.
yeah.
We're going to get you guys a hotel. You're going into rest. No questions. There's like procedure, which is great. It takes the stress out. But a lot of people struggle with making that phone call. For me, I have started, it's only been in the last 6 months that I've really started noticing it. And I think it's now with enough experience, I can tell when I'm getting there. I'll start making little mistakes and I'm like, whoa, I would never make that mistake, or I'll miss a call or I'll miss something. And I'm like, wait, why the heck did that happen? And then I start questioning myself. I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I'm getting there,
Yeah,
right? And uh,
Totally.
yeah, and once you start getting to that point, you're there if you're starting to realize it.
right.
And a lot of people are worried about not getting paid if they call fatigue. I think that's a big factor, if we're being honest here. Well, if because there's like with a lot of the companies, it's if it's company controllable. So if the company's at fault for the fatigue call, whether it's something delays or hotel issues, then you usually get compensated. But if it's just you because you didn't sleep well the night before, then you're not pay protected, right? That's a big factor people put into it too, which is not a good thing. Um,
I know. You helped me make my first fatigue call earlier this year.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and just speaking from experience, I'm very mission oriented and everything like we just talked about. It was difficult because I was like, man, how many people am I about to, let down or whatever, let down, quote unquote, which I wasn't at all because you'd let them down by flying fatigued. But that's not how our brains operate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the thing is, the company should have the resources for reserves in
Mm-hmm.
those moments. And at that point, I think it's really important as a crew member to remember that you sign a release every time saying you're fit for duty.
Hmm.
And I think personally, we think about every time we're doing that, and that's why we don't. At least I don't sign it until I get into flight tech and we're about to push or something like that,
Yep.
because I truly don't know if I'm fit for duty until
Right.
we're ready to push. But I think it's easy to not take advantage of it, but not really think about it sometimes. Being like, okay, what does it mean to have 240 people in the back to go do a red eye that we're already delayed 4 hours, and saying, okay, are we really capable of doing this? And I think as professional aviators, that is something that should be brought up more often. I think, and there should be. I almost think there should be like company training on like, okay, how do we get in these positions, and what are the tools that we have available to us to understand, is this a safe flight? I don't know if they'll actually do that, because they'll probably lose more money and cancellations if they teach people those things, kind of like what you said, Scott. I don't really know where that kind of boundary is, but that's something definitely that I want to do a better job of like not questioning myself, being like, is this a good decision or not? Just being like, yeah, do it, because you're giving everyone else a disservice. And that doesn't mean like if we're yawning once that, we're fatigued, but like, just like you said, Scott, like if you're noticeably making mistakes, in terms of even like leaving the house and you forget a couple things, it's easy to identify it at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, like, this is where a good crew briefing really comes in, because it can catch stuff like that. I mean, I remember when I flew corporate, it's not in part of, I don't know how many, if it's just 121s don't include it, but like the last question, the last part of my briefing we would always include is, I got good rest last night, I'm feeling good, or fighting with the wife, so but I'm fit, are you fit? Like that, we'd always ask each other that the last thing before, and that was really helpful, because there were times where you'd be like, oh man, it's been a rough week, I'm having a rough time, and that way the other guy knows, okay, I'm gonna keep a closer
watch
eye
them.
on, yeah,
Right.
keep an eye
Right.
on him, he might be on the border, or it could be the red flag where the other guy's like, whoa, hang on, if you're not up to this, this is not, we're about to go to fly into, Little Rock, Arkansas at dusk on a spring night, and there's thunderstorms everywhere. It might not be a good idea right now. Like, let's delay the flight.
Right.
Scott, I have a question for you. You were in ATC before this, all this stuff going on at Newark right now.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it from a pilot perspective. How does that translate to them for being fatigued or anything like that? Is that the same kind of way they go about that? Or I'm just wondering if you have any idea of kind of that perspective.
There's a lot of fatigue in the air traffic industry right now. They've been on mandatory 6-day weeks for years. This all ties back into the controller shortage they've had, which is a whole nother conversation. I don't think there was like a fatigue call per se.
Just a sick call at that point?
Yeah, you would just sit call.
Wow.
And I will say this about the agency. When I worked for them, the management team, said if you're not feeling mentally prepared to work, you should call in sick. Like, they encouraged you to use your sick time if you're fatigued or mentally not there, had a big fight with the wife, kids sick, something, right? There was no separate fatigue clause from what I remember, and this was back in 2017 era,
Sure.
late teens. So, there might be something different now. I don't know. I'd love to get a controller on here. That would be awesome, but it's really hard to get them on. They don't,
That would be.
they're worried about it. But,
Yeah.
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 I'm keeping my feelers out there. Hopefully I'll get somebody. Any controllers that want to come on, send us an email, autopilotonpodcast@gmail.com.
Do a little tell-all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not even, just a generalized question.
I'm
I don't want to
kidding.
get anybody in trouble, but it'd be good, it'd be good to have
And
their current perspective.
that's
Mhm.
it. Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Even a contract controller would be great, because they don't have as much liability for
Right.
these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, because it would
So
be interesting if like how we have to sign a release every single time we fly. If that's
yep.
something that happens, well, since you have some experience, Scott, was there anything that's you actually like certified? Yes, I'm ready for this, or is it you kind of show up your normal kind of 9 to 5 when you were controlling?
So when I was a controller, you log in when you get
Hmm.
there, and I can't remember if that was saying that you're good to go and all that. I remember you had to log in when you got there, and then you had to sit down and watch a weather briefing, and then you would go get put on a position. Um,
Okay.
it's been so long. It's been, where are we at, 5?
Almost
Man,
a
it's been almost
decade,
a,
eh?
almost a decade since I've done it.
Getting
So
close.
that's a great question. I'm gonna have to ask my buddies that are still there, what the, man, I can't even remember. I pretty sure I remember when you got there, you almost like clocked in, like you just
Hmm.
log into one of the computers that you were on duty that day. But I can't remember. I can't honestly remember. Yeah, but with us, a lot of guys, because there's going to be a lot of non-airline pilots that listen to this. In the 135 world, the companies I worked for, we didn't have to sign like a fit for duty release. Um,
Nope.
so like, but in the airlines, you have to do that. On all our EFBs, usually it's digital now. There's a pop-up saying, I certify under Part 117 that I'm fit and safe to perform the duties required for the flight. So it's all logged.
Right.
So guys that maybe in 135 are still trying to get to the airlines, that's something you have to do.
Yeah.
So it's a little more regulated for sure.
Yeah. Which, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely appreciated that much more in the 121 world because, yeah, you're right. In the 135 world, it was, yeah, you were out there getting the job done, hell or high water, basically. You hate to phrase it like that or think about it that way, but the reality of the situation is we were so goal oriented.
Yep.
Um, and it's easy to get yourself into positions where it's like, maybe that wasn't the best idea.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a question for you too. Is there ever a time when you told, everyone always talks about, oh, don't work for a place that is going to force you to go or something like that.
Hmm.
But I know that's not always the case with someone trying to be like super, mean to you and be like, you need to go. But, they're running a business too. And
Right.
I'm
Right.
sure that, small margins.
Right.
And so they want that plane to go. I've never had an issue, but I've never done that kind of work before. Everyone always says that kind of stuff, but I'm wondering, can you guys break it down? If you've ever made that decision, like, how do you go about that for the pilots listening, or how do you put your foot down in a way like that? Whether you're fatigued or the airplane or the weather, whatever it is, how do you guys go about that?
Tom, you want to start?
Sure. It's uh
Did I hit a note on that?
maybe.
Yeah, I got different experiences.
It's
I'll go after
um
Tom. I'll let Tom lead the way.
I I will say it's hard. It is very, very hard to turn a flight down or to say no. Just I mean mainly because it's like this is what we work for, this is what we do. It's part of essentially our identity to a degree. More oftentimes it was like aircraft centric where there's something wrong and it was MEL'd and you're like, okay, well you're good to go. And it's like, really? Really though? You're gonna want us to
Yeah.
take this airplane with this MEL part all the way down to minimums and then come back and shoot another approach all the way down to minimums. One of those things where you have to develop the I'm stealing this from somebody, but the 30,000 foot view of, hey, let's step back, let's really look at what's going on here, and then the common sense check of like, does this make sense? Do we really need to be doing this? And but then also, especially if you're in a crew environment, like relying not necessarily relying on, but talking to the other person that's with you. Because oftentimes, especially if you're a newer pilot, younger pilot, sitting in the right seat, there is this, it's easy to be along for the ride because there isn't the experience there. And the only way to do that is to go do it. But as somebody who's been in those situations, it's also then our duty to be like, hey, here's what's going on, here's what could happen, and let's not do that. The hard part is, yeah, is actually just stopping the operation and really listening to your gut. We over time we develop good aeronautical decision making, and just through our experience, when you have that little, for me, it like happens in my gut when you start to feel that uneasiness.
Hmm.
At that point, I'm like, you know what? Let's stop. We'll stop everything.
Sure.
Um, have that conversation, whether it's with yourself, with your crew, lay it all out, and then make a
How
decision
does the
from there.
boss usually take it?
Hmm.
Like in your experience, when you had to do that
Hmm.
Yeah.
with the
Hmm.
maintenance side done? Because they're probably
Mhm.
like, what the hell, dude? It's fine. Like, just go. It's not
Yeah.
a big deal.
Yeah.
Because it's probably $10,000 that they're losing out. I don't know, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
It
Yep.
is.
And you're
No.
saying, no,
And you're
I'm
saying
not doing
no.
that.
Exactly. And that's that. So that pressure is very real. You're going to get it from your boss. You're going to get it from other people in the company. You're going to get it from cargo. It's our duty as pilots. It's our job to have everybody understand that the buck stops here. They're not flying with us. They're not in the cockpit. They're not making those decisions. We are, and it's putting our foot down, regardless of how much pressure they put. And it's hard because I've been in situations where I've accepted a fight, and at the end of it, I was like, well, that wasn't a good idea. And ever since those things have happened, I'm much more, I don't want to say militant, but assertive in those situations where there is this big push, and you just have to say no, and turn and reframe the way you think about saying no, instead of it being like such a negative thing on ourselves because flying, not only is it a performance, but it's also something that's very core to our confidence, and not allowing that word no to work against us, but then taking that no as being, no, I'm making a decision. This is the right decision, and I'm sticking to it. And once you kind of plant your foot down, and really, depending on how long you're at a company, and then depending on the size, you usually only have to do it once.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And once you plant it, any other time you make those decisions or you lay those decisions out to those people that are putting that pressure on you, they're like, all right,
We know he's not going to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're right.
And so,
Exactly.
That's a
yeah,
great way to think about that.
yeah,
Yeah. You have to think of it legally. You
yeah,
have to lay your case out. Okay,
yeah,
I'm going to say no, and they're going to want to know why, and I need to be able to explain why. Um,
right,
because otherwise, whether they think you're a coward or you're trying to get out of it, it makes it's going to make you look bad. All these things, right? And those are also factors you consider when you're saying no, which make it really hard to consider it. In a 135 or 91, you usually don't. There's no reserves to call in.
right.
If you say
It's just
no,
canceled.
yeah. Man, I worked for an operator where weather was a factor a lot. There was like a few week period where it was a fight every day, where I'd come in and the chief would be like, "Just go, man. It's good." No, it's not good, man. Yeah, just go. No, we talking about so and so would do it. Well, then get so and so to do it is what I would say, and he'd be, "Oh, well, so and so's already on another flight, right? Because he went and did something else." And it just got to a point where I'd like literally just take the clipboard or the can, and I would put it in his desk and say, "Fine, you go do it." Like I had to do that for like a week in a row.
Yeah,
And then he was like, "Oh, okay, we'll delay the flight a couple hours, see if the weather clears up." Like, and I'm sure they're just used to being able to push people into sketch situations. I've got a lot of mentors I've talked to over the years and learned from. And a guy who we're going to have on soon, he taught me there's a difference between a pilot and an aviator. The aviators are the ones that have the experience and have learned to make those decisions. And a big part of that is it's your ticket, it's not theirs.
hmm,
So, they're not worried about it because if you make a mistake, it's not their license that's getting to take away their livelihood. You know,
right,
what they don't realize is if you crash that airplane, everybody's out of a job. But they don't think
yeah,
about it like that because they don't think that's going to happen. They just think, oh, you might break a reg or something, but that's his problem. Because in the 135 world, there's no ASAP. There's no, you got NASA ASRS. That's the best thing you got, but you're on the hook. You're gonna have to answer
right,
personally for everything. I still take that with me today when people, even in the airlines. I mean, no, thank God, nobody at the airlines has ever tried to pressure me to do something or fly a broken airplane. Oh, it's so nice,
yeah,
but it's like it's my license, it's my ticket, not anybody else's, not your co-pilot's, your captain, your FO, whoever. It's not his ticket, it's your ticket, and it's your livelihood. So that's once you learn to think like that and just go, okay, am I willing to sacrifice an entire career, much less my life or the life of somebody else, for this decision? That's usually all you have to ask yourself, and you know the answer.
yeah.
Um,
No,
if it gets to
that's a good
that
way to
point,
put it.
keep it moving. We touched on CRM a little bit. I know you wanted to talk a little more about that, Tom. So let's go into
Sure.
that.
Yeah, and what, as we all know, CRM is just a very broad, broad topic that we can discuss, but uh, or you can go very in depth with it. But I was just more wanting to kind of touch base and have a bit of a discussion as to like when we think about CRM or when we talk about CRM, like what are some ways that we like to contribute to it? What are effective things about CRM that allow for, a very effective flight deck, a smooth flight? What are ways that we can do better? One of the things that I've been trying to better myself on or learn more about is debriefs after, whether it's after each leg or after the flight, regardless of how it went, just making sure that we open up the space for everybody, which is kind of to some degree, like I'm finding it a little bit challenging, whether or not like you see something that they may not have seen or said, and like how do you bring that up? Because you're kind of wanting buy-in from the other person, because it needs to be a two-way street.
Mhm.
And so learning,
SkyWest,
yeah,
SkyWest was like that. That was part of it. You would fail your check ride if you did not debrief the flight.
really,
Oh,
Yeah, like
that's cool.
it was a
that's really cool.
so it was every flight at the end of it was the debrief. Every flight.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and it was super weird when we came to this airline and I like tried to debrief with him. He's like, "What are you doing, man? Like let's just go on to the next flight." Because it was ingrained into me, and I
Yeah,
love that. I love that because I thought I knew what I did well, but I also don't know maybe if there's something else that he picked up on. And I'm all about trying to get better. I'm
right.
always trying to, because when I do transition to the left seat, I want to know the mistakes, even if they're really small. If they
Hmm.
know different tips and a lot of the time, like I never felt like it was someone coming after me because I would go and
Right.
debrief the captain on how he did on that landing
Hmm.
or something like that. Hey, you came in 5 knots fast. Maybe if you pulled the power a little bit or you looked at the power before, just small things like that.
Totally.
Because we're both professional pilots, you're not I don't know, you're not super inexperienced at that point, and I think that you both can learn a lot from each other. So, um,
100%.
I don't
Oh,
know.
totally.
I think maybe just telling your FOs when you're going flying, being like, "Hey, this is something I'm really trying to do, and just trying to become a better person." And if you want to do it, great. But if you see anything after every flight, I would love for you to debrief me first, because then it allows them to like not feel so much pressure on it, I guess you could say,
Sure.
and open it up that way. Because I think with a lot of guys, especially younger guys, they don't want to offend or they don't want to overstep on someone else who has 20 years of experience in Airbus. I flew with a guy a week ago. His date of hire was, I think, like 7 days before I was born.
Hmm.
So he had 26 years at this airline. And so obviously I'm not going to tell him that, right? He already probably knows, but like I think a lot of times guys in my position in that sense, you got to be careful on what you say to someone like that because they've been doing this for literally 2 decades, 2.5
Right.
decades, right? But I also think that they always have things to learn too. And it's like,
Totally.
I'm not going to call them out on huge things, but like if I saw something, I, I would like to know, even if I'm two decades into this job.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So that's my perspective on that.
No,
Yeah.
that's really cool. I like that was a standard thing that you guys did after every, whether was it leg or flight, that you'd actually
Every flight,
came together and talked about it. And I think now as we see the industry shifting, where a lot of the seniority, especially recently, is starting to go away, and we have this new crop of pilots, this new crop of aviators, that even becomes more imperative to have these discussions because they may not be comfortable bringing it up, and so it's then our job as the senior folks to broach that subject and be more comfortable with how do we go about talking about these things, good or bad or just in general, you know.
I was just going to say, if we don't do those things, we end up how was it Japan or Korea back in like 1990s,
Yeah.
and how the Asiana flight or whatever,
Yep.
Hmm.
and how you don't want to question your captain because you don't say anything. That's just not how it
Avianca.
is.
Right.
All the
Yeah.
Yeah.
big crashes. From yep.
And so I also think for those guys that are 40 or 50 years old or 60, I think they need to step back a little bit and, again, with all due respect, and say, can I take critique from a 26-year-old who has a couple thousand hours and 1,000 hours in the Airbus? Am I able to do that?
Hmm.
Because I'm not gonna lie, I think there's at least a couple of people that probably will say, no, you have nothing to add to what is going to make me a better pilot. And there's just some people in the industry or in life that are going to be like that, who don't want to take critiques.
Right.
But if you have your airline, your actual employer say, no, you need to do this. This is part of the SOPM now. I think it allows that culture to be a lot easier to implement.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it comes down to the captain setting the tone, I think, right off the bat of, hey,
Totally.
like 90+% of the guys I fly with, part of their brief is always, hey man, you see something, say something. I'm a big boy. I'm not
Yep.
afraid to learn, and it just sets the tone of like, okay, how you approach that could change how they respond to it. But, like what I've learned is when I see something that I don't understand or I'm like, that's weird, I just ask them, hey man, curious why you do it that way. I haven't seen anybody do it that way before. And
Right.
and usually that's soft enough where they're like, oh well, I did, I know it might not be standard, but I do it like that. Oh, okay, cool. You
Yeah.
might learn something. You might go, okay, I'm never going to incorporate that when I'm in their seat. So like you're always
Right.
going to learn.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, no,
yeah,
I think that you're right there, Scott, with it is to a degree the captain's job of like opening that up. And
right.
one of the things that I often will do, look, man, like or even just having a bit of a reflection point of like knowing myself and knowing like where I'm at in relationship to the people that I'm flying with, being somebody that's new to the aircraft and understanding that the person sitting next to me probably has way more time and oftentimes, like I'm asking them, like, "Hey, like, what do you think about this? Or how would you manage this descent? What would you do in these situations?" And like,
Right.
when you ask those questions and they start talking, and you're like, "Oh man, that's awesome! Like, keep doing that." And then I'm learning more. At the end of whatever that leg or that flight was, that's also a nice little point in time where it's like, okay, cool. Hey, when we had that discussion about this X, Y, or Z, like that was awesome. Keep doing that because I learned more. Like that gives them more confidence,
Mm-hmm.
which is awesome, awesome to see. Uh, and eventually, they're going to be in the left seat, and hopefully at that point, they can continue that and give that to the next group of first officers whenever they are in those positions.
Yeah. Plus, it makes you somebody people want to fly with. You
Right?
know,
Yeah.
like that's man, that's it. It is a factor.
Yeah.
Especially for CRM. If you're that guy nobody wants to fly with, even if you're just misunderstood or somebody rubbed you the wrong way and you got a bad reputation off of one person, it still makes it way more. It's an uphill battle at that point. You're starting at a
Hmm.
disadvantage.
Right.
People are gonna be like, "Ugh, I'm gonna be careful what I say around this guy."
Yeah.
Like you don't want that.
No, no, that
Yeah,
doesn't set the tone at all.
those are things that make a good captain, right? Like
Yeah.
being humble, open to critique, willing to work as a team. What makes a good FO?
Who wants to start?
Go ahead, Tom.
Tom, you're the
Yeah.
captain. Start us off. Yeah.
Yeah.
I one of the big things, one of the things that I definitely like to kind of hone in on in my flight deck is just attitude. Attitude being a very big thing as the day goes on, becomes more complex. I do like to see first officers still being able to be positive. It's so easy to go down the path of like, this happened and this happened and this happened and this, it all starts to fall apart. And the mood changes. Then
Mm,
all of a sudden, that person doesn't want to be as cooperative. They may or may not even know that they're acting, that they could be acting that way. Attitude being one of the big ones. The desire and willingness to learn or teach is also huge. Willingness to share information, and then first officers that are very forward thinking, whether it's we're on the ground and they start to see something develop and prompting the captain, like, hey, like this is happening. What do you think about this? Or hey, this is happening. Let me call dispatch, or I'll do this, and start to take more initiative. But then communicating that and like, okay, cool, yeah, go ahead and do that. I can take care of these other things that are starting to happen because, as we all know, delays happen, stuff starts to fall apart. It's just that cascading effect. When that just falls on one person's lap, that becomes very difficult to manage, and then all of a sudden you're late or you start to miss things. So I do appreciate it when first officers aren't so focused on just one thing, but then can step out of their box a bit and start to see other things that are going on around them and be more look forward or look beyond what's exactly in front of them to help the whole operation.
Can I jump in real quick there?
Go
Like, I
for it.
really like that. You're talking about initiative, and I think it's called open loop communication. But like,
Yeah.
it's really important. Like, if it's a busy situation, it's awesome. When I was a captain, I mean, I'm an FO at an airline now, but when I was a captain, it's so nice to have the FOs like, hey man, let me do this. Like, I'll help
Yeah.
you out, and it takes a little load off you. The advice on that, is keep the other person in the loop. Don't just do it. Be like, hey man, I see you're busy. Are you cool if I reach out to dispatch on this for you? Yes, awesome. Thanks, dude. Take care of that. Now I know he's doing that. I don't have to think about it anymore.
Right.
Like,
Right.
dude, that's awesome. People love that. Goes both ways.
Right.
Like there's nothing worse than when, like, you know, we have to switch an airplane. We're super late for a flight. They've already pre-boarded the dang airplane because like that's the worst. You walk in, the plane's boarded, and now you're just getting into an airplane. And then it's like, well, as an FO, you got to go do a walk around. And then, like, you come back and the captain's sitting there on their friggin' cell phone.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, couldn't you have loaded the box for me? Push three
Right.
buttons? And they're like, oh, no, that's your job. Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'll get off my little soapbox there. Back. We're talking about FOs here.
No, no, I think that's you're right on there. It's it has to be much more of a collaborative thing. But then I'm sure you've experienced this before, Scott, but like um sitting in the left seat and being the captain, also being comfortable with your FO and like trusting them. Um and when you start to delegate those things and you actually watch it happen and you're like, oh, and it kind of just takes some weight off of your shoulders and how good that feels. And it's like, okay, cool. Like I can start to like delegate a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then after a while, you start to realize like, you're much more of a manager in this situation where it's like you're managing the aircraft, but your FO. And once you are effective at that, the whole thing starts to like compound and it just gets easier and easier.
I got a lot of thoughts on everything just because I think it's really a wild card with who you get, and a lot of guys we fly with are great.
Hmm.
I think number one thing FOs need to do is meet their captain where they are in that day. You need to be able to understand what mood they're in first and be able to kind of guide the day from there. And,
Right.
if they're not having a good day, if they're being quiet, don't ask them 1,000 questions, just basic stuff, right? Because you're just going to piss them off
Yeah.
and the day is not going to go well in that sense. He's going to not have good CRM. So I think just understanding where the captain is in that moment. Another thing too is, we talk about FOs being ahead and being able to reach out and look at it from a manager perspective. I also think we have to be careful on becoming PIC.
Mm.
So I had a captain tell me a story at SkyWest where they diverted to Austin and there's a storm over the field or whatever, and the captain went out to go get something to eat or whatever, and the FO called dispatch and changed the fuel or something like that,
Oh.
and it actually put them over max fuel or something like that, right? Where it was like, hey, don't start making decisions. And what I like to do is, like last night, for example, we had a 4 hour, 4 or 7, I can't remember. It was hours long for delay, and where we had a deboard and everything like that happened. Easiest one for us, we called an ARTR. I don't know what the rest of the industry calls, but an updated release
Mm.
because the report time or the release time was an hour after, right? For me, I like to say to them if they're busy, hey, I'm seeing the time is going to get pretty close here. Would you like me to go and do this? not go on to dispatch and just whip it out myself and not include them either, thinking I'm saving them time.
Right.
Because you're going to piss off the guy that way too, because there's a lot of things that they might be wanting to dictate how the show is run a specific way in their decision making. So I always like to say I try to help the captain aid in his decision making. And if I see something outside of where his kind of scope is, I like to broaden his horizon and at least suggest it.
Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't want to do it that way, fine, whatever. But at least I'm saying, hey, I'm also thinking about the larger picture. And if you like this idea, go for it. But if not, no worries. And then lastly, I think for me, I think it's all about building kind of a... In aviation, you don't need to be their friend, quote unquote, but I also think it's nice to be able to spend a couple of days with someone and talk about things that they like to do. So I think it's called the Ford method, family, occupation, relationships, and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can talk about those 4 different things, and if they're having a bad day, start talking to them about different things. Like the last guy I flew with, he was having a really rough day and a lot of stuff going on in his life. And I talked to him about cooking. I love cooking, but he's phenomenal at cooking. And I said, hey, I didn't say let's dig into the subject, but I was like, oh, perfect. Let's go there.
Yeah.
So we spent all of cruise going through that. And by the end of the time we got down on the ground, he was like sending me different movies, more engaged. And I could tell being like, oh, boom, that's exactly what a good FO is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And the captain can do the same thing, right? But
Sure.
I really think it's the FO's job, right?
That
to
is.
be able to, so that's my perspective on what I threw.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Ford method, huh?
I really like that. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm stealing that too.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude.
So I can have a conversation with anyone for about an hour and a half and not even think twice because I know the type of questions, and I'm also a very curious person. So, I have 1,000 questions for anyone in their life because that's just who I am. So it's pretty easy. But there's a fine line of being annoying too.
Right.
So,
sure.
But I'm also really curious. So it's kind of hard for me to distinguish. So it's some self-reflection in that too.
But going back to that all ties into what you said about meeting him where he's at, figuring out where they're at that day. Are they open to 1,000 questions? Are they not?
Mm-hmm.
It brings up a question. We're starting to see the industry trend a lot younger with the new hires, with the college level students and stuff getting in. How do you think the lack of life experience is going to contribute to that?
I don't know, because I'm 26, I'm almost 27 in a couple months, but I don't think Scott, I was in your crash pad and you thought I was 30 something.
Dude, this whole time. 3-4 weeks ago, I found out you were in your mid 20s. I thought you were at least 30. It's maturity.
Yeah, so exactly. So it's difficult because everyone is different in that sense. And
it's true. I've flown with older guys that are total idiots.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know because I don't fly with anyone my age. So I don't know what it's actually like to fly with other people outside of what I'm like to fly with. I assume they like me because they don't drop their trips. You
haven't popped up on the no-fly list?
No bid avoidance?
No. No.
That's good.
But I do think, here's what I will say. I do notice I have to, I'm not going to say prove myself, but I have to almost gain their respect a little bit.
How long have you been at the airline?
4 years total.
For your current airline.
A year and a half.
Okay, so you're a year and a half in, so your seniority number's high enough where I remember my first year, give or take, every time I got in the flight deck, they're like, how long you been here? Because they know you're a lower number. And so they're already kind of, and then, then I would tell them my background and they'd be like, oh, all right, cool. You're good. You know what you're doing.
I just don't like to explain myself. Does that make sense? I don't want to feel like I have to tell you my background and my CV.
You have to prove yourself.
To be you don't have to worry about me.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's something showing what I'm talking about. That is becoming, for lack of a better term, an epidemic in the industry. Is these kids that have gone straight, we literally had kids that were 23 years old in my new hire class, to fly an Airbus. And it's that might be normal in Europe. I don't know. But over here, historically, that's never happened before. It was super rare. and like now it's
Right.
more commonplace. So it's like you got the older guys, and they it's nothing personal. Luckily you don't look like you're 23, and you don't act like you're 23. So like once they get
When
to
I
know you,
shaved, I look pretty dang young.
you do look
If I have
younger
a
when you
beard,
shave. Yeah, with this new haircut
Yeah.
with your frosted tips, you do look. But like, with time, as your seniority number gets higher, once I hit
Yeah.
because I'm about 2 years in, and like now nobody even they're
Yeah.
like, oh, good, I'm glad I'm flying with somebody with a little bit of time here, because there's just so many new people. Now you're the senior guy, so you shouldn't have to worry about that as much anymore.
Yeah.
But you're also on a big base too, so you're not flying with the same guys over and over again.
I'm honestly, it's kind of refreshing flying with people that I've flown with now,
Mhm.
because I'm like, oh, I don't have to worry about them thinking of that. So
Yeah.
I would say it's like a 50-50 split, just because I am working quite a bit right now.
Mhm.
So I'm getting kind of the senior trips that are going to open time, and I swap into those. And then some of the more junior ones. So it's kind of like a mixed bag of what I'm actually flying right now. So I'm flying out with like all different types of captains. Like I flew with the number 35 guy in the company,
Wow.
the one I was telling you about. And that was a 3-day trip, and I swapped into that from open time, and it was a great trip.
Oh,
But
cool.
there's no way
What's
I would
open
have been able
time?
to hold that. Yeah, right.
Out west, we don't have any of that.
You got to be quick with it.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, I don't pick up open time. I swap into open time.
Oh, there you
So,
go. Ah,
Big
okay.
brain.
Big brain. Just pile it on there. Ugh.
For all my union brothers and sisters.
There you go. For your union brothers. Make sure you put your lanyard on.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's
man.
funny, man.
Ugh.
Tomo, it was nice to meet you, man.
Yeah,
like, honestly, you seem like an amazing guy.
Likewise, Rob.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Yeah, I'm glad that we could do this. I was going to say, John, you need to come up here so we can fly together.
Yeah.
Dude,
We'll take
show
him out
me
in
that
150.
backcountry, dude.
Yeah, no kidding.
God, dude, I would love to do that.
No, definitely. Yeah, if you ever find yourself up here, and Scott, this also goes for you too, as you know.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll take an airplane out.
Tom will take you fishing.
Hell yeah.
I would love that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool, man.
Cool.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Another great episode. Yeah.
It's been super cool.
Yeah. Appreciate having you. For everybody listening, autopilotonpodcast.com. Gmail is autopilotonpodcast@gmail.com. Reach out if you got any suggestions, want to be on the show. We'll put some notes in the description and some links. And we'll see you guys on the next one.